Wuhan has got you all infected. I just came up with that. I flash back to being a little kid watching a Busta Rhymes video. And Wuha is just too much like Wuhan. And I guess Busta Rhymes had me in check, but Wuhan's got us all infected. I'm not a rapper. Okay. You see, Grasshopper, it comes down to a question of intent. What is your intent? What's China's intent? You know, they ask, like, China really brought this one upon themselves. Did you blame me and shit? This virus came out of China, okay? And it's a question of intent. And let me boil it down. Okay, China either created this virus in the lab down the street from the meat market, and it escaped or got released. Okay, either they had an intention to have this virus, and it came out of a lab somehow, or it was created in their markets, their meat markets, that are unsanitary, okay? And it was created through negligence, okay? It was either created in the lab with intent, or it was created on the street, meat market, through negligence. Now, from my point of view, the negligence is intentional. Okay, whether it came out of the lab or the meat market doesn't really matter, because the intent is there either way. Let's say that it was in the meat market. Well, you intended to never do anything about those meat markets. You know, you have a history, China, of flus and stuff coming out of this kind of thing. That, you know, unhygienic practices. So that's where the intention is. The intent is to be negligent. Okay. Also, to China, to Xi Jinping himself, I watched you speak at Davos. I heard what you said about the global community. And this is what I want you to know. China, the Politburo, Xi Jinping, if you guys want to be the world now, let me explain this to you. The world now is global. It's intertwined, okay? We're all in this together. So if China wants to be a member of this new global community that we've created, they need to take responsibility, okay? Because we're going to lead this new global century, and if China, that old hound dog, if China wants to be accepted into this new global order, okay, they need to start being responsible. Zing, I just zing Jinping. Anyways, now I'm going to open the Bible, and I'm going to go to Timothy, because some people like to say that God's not real. Okay, first off, before I open the Bible, if God isn't real and God didn't create the universe, that's your right to think that. It doesn't upset me when people say that. Okay, I happen to believe that there's a divine creator, the entire universe, this whole thing, that it's not an AI program. Okay, it's a consciousness. It's the wellspring of all life, and it is not an accident. Okay, so if you're going to say that God doesn't exist, well then where did everything come from? And let's go to the Big Bang. Let me open to Timothy too. The Big Bang. Where did everything come from? Nothing. It was an explosion. Okay, what exploded? We don't know. You don't know what exploded? No. Okay, so something that was not was destroyed in order to create something that is. Okay, you know what that sounds like to me? It sounds like what in Timothy Paul calls so-called knowledge. You know, it's like all the way to, it's an atheist thing though. You know, a lot of the scientific community went atheist, and they want to say the Big Bang, they want to say that, but they don't have a good answer. And when you really press them, they have less of an answer, okay? And this, another thing I'd like to say before this is an ethics book. Okay? It's a historical document, and it's also an ethics book. Okay. So, in, what is it, Timothy? This is Timothy 2. Guard what has been entrusted to you, avoid the godless chatter and contradictions of what is falsely called knowledge. For by professing it, some have missed the mark as regards the faith. Okay. So, what that says there is, where is the moral doctrine? Where is the ethics left in science? You know, I don't really see it. They don't know what created everything. They're fine with not knowing and continuing to try to carbon date things or do whatever, or come up with some kind of new formula or equation or math problem that will solve it for them. And they've missed the mark on faith completely, because science doesn't offer any ethics. So it's like, that's one thing. Okay, there is no God, yada yada. You don't really know what created the universe. There is no underlying to atheism, and I guess whatever the scientific, but there's no underlying ethical bounds, really, anymore. Yeah, there was, I guess. But look at science. The question of missing the mark on faith. Science can be good and bad. Science can be used for bombs, weapons, things like that, and it can be used to cure diseases. It can create a disease and it can cure a disease. Now, when they removed God from science, which was totally unnecessary and all political, the ethics started to crumble. The Hippocratic Oath went away. You started having really unethical things go on in the scientific community because they had no moral bound, no moral ground anymore. It was more of like a progress at all costs kind of thing. But on the same token, science hasn't produced anything really significant in the past, since the millennium. They haven't done anything they haven't really cured AIDS. They can't, science has a problem with the flu still. I'm not saying that God's going to solve the flu, but they haven't cured cancer. There's no, working alternative energy source, really. I mean, it's all really, really strange to me, to where things have kind of gotten worse, even to the point where the ethics are so corrupted, to where computer science, is now wholly unethical, censorship, all this stuff. So that's what I propose to you guys, is that science, the atheists and the atheist scientists, they're those who do godless chatter, who deal in contradictions, and what is falsely called knowledge. Okay? So there. Now let's go through Timothy a little bit here. Well, it's kind of like, okay, they don't like God. Well, it's kind of two different things. It's like, God doesn't exist. I believe God exists. They say God doesn't exist. I can live up to the standards as much as possible in the Bible, and I can find happiness. Okay? The ethical groundwork for me leads to happiness, and it works for me. My everyday life is fine, right? That's what that offers. But then science comes around and says, or the atheist community of science, there's no God, and it's like, okay, well, then I guess ethically that doesn't have an answer for me, for my everyday life, right? Right and wrong. So what are you offering? If God is totally out of the picture with this atheist community, what are you offering? And they always turn to science. Well, they're not offering the cure to cancer. They're not offering the cure to AIDS. they're scrambling with the flu. They seem to be more concerned about slamming dust particles together in a Hadron Collider, or trying to understand how two things can be in the same place at once, than they are any kind of real space. Okay, it's like I see that kind of atheist science, the science, the faith of it, having not really delivered. So they kind of just like moved on, right? Like, well, I don't know, cancer. We'll build cancer research institutes. We will build more and more huge hospitals to do research on, but we'll never get an answer, And meanwhile, everything else is kind of getting screwed up. Like, societies itself are getting screwed up, and there's just no answers. To where, how important is it now that we cure cancer, like today? Like, what's the priority? Like, curing cancer or reinstilling very basic preventative medical practices and ethics back into the population. Like the ethical part of it, like wash your hands, keep distance, like don't be unclean kind of thing. So thanks, science. I'm not concerned about the foam at the edge of the universe. Okay. I guess it talks about, I talked about how communism and atheists and that kind of community extrapolate everything backwards, and how it doesn't produce a good result. It's like this book right here. This is a 2,000-year-old book. The letter to Timothy is from Paul. It's not the words of Jesus. It's Paul's interpretation of the teachings of Jesus as an apostle and his advice and critiques of, whatever it is, the Thessalonians or whoever it is, or to Timothy or any of this. And I want to talk about the part where the wife, it essentially says that the wife should not rule over the husband, that she should be modest, like well-dressed, all of that. The traditional kind of like, I guess, kind of the housewife of the 50s. The traditional idea of the wife, Now, since this book is 2,000 years old in this country, see, we reformed, and it's like, okay, men and women are equal. Okay, we shouldn't rule over the other. But then you start getting this political kind of feminist thing exactly from the opposite. The women should rule over the men. And it's like, what do they base it on? Judeo-Christian patriarchy. Where do they get all this nonsense from? The universities that are run by China. Okay, to the point where having a functional relationship became a real problem. It really did. You look at the divorce rates, you look at like single mothers or primarily or fathers in families, people aren't sticking together, and how that's all done on purpose. To like, to anything. I guess I'll stop right there. But all this stuff about God doesn't exist and this and that, and it's like, well, neither does your marriage anymore, or whatever it is. What are you going to offer? Like, I can see the difference. I've seen this. When I was a little kid, my parents are still together. My grandparents are still together. And there's reasons why they stayed together and they're still together. Okay? Because this leftist thing doesn't work. I could go on and on. Don't even make me bring up abortion. Okay? I want to, but I'm not gonna. So, we'll see what happens. But it's come down to, I think it's come down to an ethical thing with people. It really is like more and more we're being presented a choice between the, I guess it would be, we've reached the end of the road with a lot of these philosophies and these ideas and applying them to the real world, you know, to where now there's two choices and they're on like you, it's almost like you're being drawn to one end of the spectrum or the other, you know. Do you want slavery and like crime and you know, illegal immigration and no economy and abortion and drugs and fentanyl and you know, censorship and all that, or do you want like individual liberty? You know, do you want like right to property? Do you want to be able to have a life outside of a controlling totalitarian system? Would you like to be faced with a whore or like a well-dressed, modest woman? You know, there's a lot of confusion. All of this stuff, all of the rewriting and extrapolating backwards on what was established to have worked hasn't led anywhere good. There's so many unhappy people, especially on the left, in the atheist community. More and more, you start to realize that they're just sad and depressed, or they're sexually depraved, they're corrupt, there's something seriously wrong with them. And I've never had that problem. I never had to find something worldly to reach out to and grab onto and find meaning in. You know, like money or a group of friends or a position or fame or whatever it was. I never needed any of that because I've been building my ethical life this whole time. Okay? And now, to finish it with this, you know, the Christian way of life stresses that forgiveness, you know, turning the other cheek, you know, helping the poor, which are all good things, but it's been used against, it's been seen as a weakness. That time, it's been over for me. That was never a thing with me. Like, I always saw the lack of any of that, any ethics as a weakness, okay? But turning the other cheek, so what has happened is that the other side of the fence, the atheist community, the leftists, the communists, have missed the mark on faith. They don't understand it, and when they're faced with it now, they don't have an answer. They have nothing they can compare to it. And it's winning. I guess what I'm saying is that I believe that the ethics in Christianity, the Constitution of this country, are definitely worth fighting for. You know, it's definitely worth sacrificing something for. I think another problem on the left is that they haven't had to go through any real austerities in life. They've, to go on, you know, it's like their sufferings and their austerities are all invented and made up in their own lives. Like they've always sought to fit in, so they don't have to go through any of those lonely times. You know, always trying to patch it up somehow with some worldly thing. While people like me, on the other hand, have had nothing but austerity from not jumping into that boat. Okay? Like, you don't get the group of friends. You don't get the shoe-in at the academy or the university. You don't get the Facebook likes, So that has made me whole and sound as a person. And I welcome the leftists, I welcome their criticism. I welcome their hatred. I welcome their violence. I welcome their whole scheme. Because I got something for them. It's called self-worth, faith, truth, justice, that kind of stuff. So I say bring it on. Because I don't want to go down this road anymore in this country where China dictates the cultural terms. I don't want China coming in here and pushing abortion through politicians and useful idiots, okay, or Bernie Sanders or whoever, or socialism or communism. They don't get to write the culture. So this whole coronavirus thing, I see everything stopped. It had to happen sooner or later because people have to. They have to identify it, pick it up with their hands, and look at it and work with it, and get it to where they need it to be, where we need it to be in this country. Because China and a lot of foreigners have dictated cultural terms to us this whole time. So that's what I say. It's going to be a process. I hope this is the beginning of that process. Way too late.